Welcome learners to this mini lecture corresponding to pages 221 to 229 of Lewis Mumford's Techniques and Civilization. As we've already learned, electricity was the new source of power of the eotechnic phase. This mini lecture will focus on how electricity impacted the location and concentration of industries and the detailed organization of the factory. As you can see here, I have combined two of the sections of reading into one just because I thought they fit a little more nicely. So we'll see how that works out. Okay, looking at how did the eotechnic phase and electricity impact the location of industries. We know that paleotechnic industry depended completely on the coal mine as a source of power. That really limited or I guess created some economies of efficiency for paleotechnic industry. So the big paleotechnic industries, in order to operate more efficiently, cost-wise, were located near the supplies of coal. We know that, and so that this limited, I guess, where these industries would be located. They'd be located near supplies of coal. Electricity, however, can be developed by energy from a number of sources. It can be developed through hydroelectric water. It can be developed through burning coal. It can be developed through solar power. So the fact that electricity was a much more flexible energy source greatly impacted the location of the industries physically, where they could be located. It also impacted the concentration of industries. We know that the Industrial Revolution in the Paleotechnic phase occurred mainly in Western Europe, especially in Britain, and then moved to the United States from there. But this new reliance on electricity spread out possible industrial sites globally. And we know that electricity was much easier to transmit over high voltage lines than coal previously was to ship and transport to other places. In the reading, Mumford talks about Asia being a future industrial giant. He kind of predicts Asia as an industrial giant. He doesn't really talk, though, about the supplies of coal in China, which there are vast supplies of coal in China, but he does make the point that no longer will it be just the monopoly of Western Europe and the United States that will be the industrial giants, that all over the globe people have the capacity with electricity to create this new source of energy. And then finally, the organization of the factory. The electric motor created much more flexibility in the design of the factory. When the factories relied on steam power, there would be one main drive. And what they did was try to connect as many belts as they could off of that main drive onto the machines in the factory. And so this led to what Mumford called giantism in a way. You know, the factories were huge because if you were going to run the steam engine, you might as well run it with as many machines hooked up to that steam engine as possible. So the electric motor created this flexibility by increasing efficiency, the arrangement of the machines in functional units. You know, the factory designers were now able to put the machines where they would like to put them in a way that made the most sense production-wise, rather than be limited by where that drive was, where they needed to have belts. Each unit could work at its own rate. You know, when all the machines were hooked into that central drive, in order to shut down or slow down a machine, it affected the entire factory. And, you know, kind of related to that, each unit could stop as needed. So this idea of electricity was huge in neotechnic industry. And probably the biggest name in neotechnic industry was Henry Ford. You know, and really Henry Ford and his method of organizing industry was the opposite of the paleotechnic industrial organization, which, as I mentioned, was afflicted by giantism, both in its administrative units and the manufacturers. Henry Ford famously, utilized this neotechnic form of energy to transform the industrial world. He saw that small units of production could be utilized by large units of administration. And as I mentioned, this ran counter to the Paleotechnic phase, where there were large plants with no attempt at all to scale their size to efficiency. Under Henry Ford and neotechnics, the size of the productive unit became a function of the operation itself, rather than being determined by the local requirements of either the steam engine or the managerial staff. The electric power plant was not merely the driving force in the new technology. The electric power plant was one of the most characteristic end products. Much of the process in the power plant, the stoking of the coal to produce the heat, to turn the turbines, was automated, relied less on the worker than power sources in the past. So even the creation of electricity was more neotechnic than past industries. And this automatism of the neotechnic world kind of is where we're talking about with this, with the lesser reliance on the proletariat as workers. This paradigm shift called for new qualities. The paradigm shift was the worker as a supervisor. Now, the new qualities were being, desired in the worker: alertness, responsiveness, intelligent grasp of the operative parts. Whereas, if you remember, in the Paleotechnic phase, the main characteristics were just somebody who could pay attention, someone who would really not think too much, but just operate as a robot, as a machine. Mumford has a quote on page 227 in the text: "But with complete automatism, freedom of movement and an initiative return for that small part of the original working force now needed to operate the plant." So, looking at this idea of freedom of movement and initiative return, even though there's a smaller number of workers needed, his point is that there's a paradigm shift in what they're asked to do. So, for that smaller group of workers, freedom of movement and initiative begin to return for that smaller group of workers. So, his point is that in the genuinely neotechnic industries, there is what he refers to as a displacement of the proletariat. Just to kind of summarize this section, these two sections of reading: electricity impacted the location and concentration of industries, as well as the organization of the factory, and the development of truly neotechnic industries led to the displacement of the proletariat. As always, remember to complete the activity corresponding with this mini lecture. These two, really, there should be two activities corresponding with this mini lecture. And also make sure to complete the two essay questions corresponding with sections 2 and 3 of this reading on the Learning Session 8 assessment. Thank you and have a good day.